Welcome to another episode of Take It EV. I'm Greg, and with me I have Quentin Willson, and we're going to be talking about EVs and misinformation and whatever else we want to do, because this is my own podcast. So sit down, listen, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. So Quentin, welcome to Take It EV.
Thank you very much.
Second time around.
Yeah.
You came back.
Yeah. It's good.
I wasn't that bad the first time. Though.
No, you weren't. You weren't. And here we are. And how long ago was that?
Oh, I can't remember. We did it over video. So
I think maybe a couple of years.
Yeah, it must have been 2 years.
And things have changed an awful lot.
They have, yes. Yeah.
Which is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I want to give a shout out to Dan Caesar and Everything Electric Show, as it's now known, for letting me have a room and record in.
It's getting quite confusing, isn't it? All these different names, stop burning stuff, everything electric, fully charged. And I can tell the listeners that we're working hard to make this simpler by having a new thing called EV UK, which is an umbrella organization which will take all this in, and everybody collaborates, all the kind of car makers and charge point operators, etc., to help both lobby government for better policy, and also just to do the kind of anti-EV narrative stuff that is so prevalent and is affecting demand. It really is.
It does.
You can see that people are not as curious as they were when we were doing shows like this and talking about them 2 years ago. There was a kind of an excitement, a zeal, but people have made up their minds that they don't want EVs. This is mainstream consumers, because of all the stuff they've read in the papers and heard it on right-wing TV and news. And I'm often beating this particular drum, but I do think, and you talk to car makers and they say, they come into the showroom and say, well, no, I would never have an EV. They catch fire, the batteries are, got to replace them after 5 years. That car park fire in Luton, that was caused by an EV. They wear out tyres really quickly. Nah, I don't want an EV.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is just not true, and it's been hugely and accurately and peer-reviewed, disproved that these things are not the case. The fire in Luton was caused by a diesel Range Rover. We all know that. There are pictures of it on the internet. Tyres, you talk to people with EVs and they say, well, my tyres are still original at 45,000 miles, which is more than I got from my ICE car. And, I've got an EV with 250,000 miles on the original battery and it's fine. And all the data we're getting back now from billions of miles of EV journeys all over the world is showing us a picture that we didn't have, 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But it's showing us a picture of reliability, dependability. They're not catching fires. Combustion cars catch fire more regularly than EVs, much more regularly than EVs. We're not seeing, advanced wear, deterioration, battery degradation. And all the surveys you get from people who have EVs say, 90% to 95% satisfaction. So I say to you, look, how is this really well-established narrative of EVs are no good, they catch fire, the batteries don't last, there is no infrastructure, I would never have one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How has that become so firmly embedded in society?
I wouldn't say I'm sick of this phrase, but I kept on saying to people today, because we've, as you can imagine, we've had that discussion many times over. I'm sure you've had on the Fair Judge view stand as well, right? I always say to people, I can't remember the actual saying, but is it the lie goes around the world before the
truth has put his boots on.
Yeah. And we just wired naturally to be resistive to things that are dangerous, right? Because as a human pack 10,000 years ago, we would be, afraid of new things. And it's hard for us to resist warning. And it takes a lot to actually get us out of the sort of the something's dangerous in a corner sort of state. And I think that's the problem. That is exploited by usually right-wing media. I don't want to point fingers, but, they know how to manipulate us, is what I'm trying to say. And you mentioned the EV UK thing that Dan kind of launched yesterday. That sounds like a very interesting platform to actually combat misinformation. Wasn't there like a rapid response part to it? And you're part of it, right?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, like, how do you, as a sort of person who's, done media, how do you not get tired of having to disprove things? And I mean, and the other thing I want to say, like, on behalf of all the hippies and left-wingers like myself, I'm happy that somebody like yourself appears on likes of GB News and, very right-wing misinformation platforms, frankly, to just like talk to these people, because we're either afraid or we think, oh, they're nuts, I don't want to talk to them.
Look, I'm a great believer that we have to engage politely and graciously and show that we're not eco zealots and nut jobs. And if it means talking to Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage, who, let's say it for the record, are actually quite nice blokes when you talk to them. And we always have a laugh. And I like Nigel, I've known him for years. And I like Jacob too. And to have this adversarial conflict on screen helps nobody. So I go on those shows and we have a laugh and I get my points across. And that's really, really important. And why do I do it still after all these years? Because it's putting something back. It's really, really important that we do this. And I'm in a position where, I know a lot of stuff about cars and I've owned all these, fantastic, expensive supercars and things. But I've, after, telling people to buy supercars and also, doing a fair fuel campaign for 10 years, I realized that the electric car, when I could do 300 miles in this car and thought, whoa, this really is the future. I thought, now I've got to help people understand how important to change this is. So that's why I changed from hydrocarbons to electricity, because it is, we need to do this. And people like me are in this unique position that they say, he's come from the dark side, he used to drive a Mercedes SLS. Yeah, sure. But, that doesn't preclude me from actually saying, this Tesla Model 3 performance is actually faster than my Mercedes SLS.
I mean, it's a fact.
yeah, completely. And why is it not okay for me to say that? So I think, I'm not a lefty. I'm not a tree hugger, although, I'm quite conscious about the environment and I tell my kids off when they don't recycle their stuff. But look, the difference we can make to the air we breathe and our energy security and using renewable energy at low cost so everybody can have cheaper electricity or even free electricity. I think that's a really important societal goal, isn't it? And people like me, if we can help make that transition happen and stop relying on oil and gas and murderous regimes who all they want to do is put the price up, then that has to be good for everybody. So I make no apologies that I'm doing this. And if people think I'm a lefty loon, okay, fine. I'm not, but I just believe that this is something that will benefit my kids, their kids, your kids, and the country as a whole. And there was a report recently from the CBI last week, I think, that said that if we don't do this, that is, grasp this electrification, this energy transition, the best case is we will miss out on 16 billion quid of economic activity. And the worst case is we'll miss out on 39 billion pounds worth of economic activity in this country. So I see all this as an opportunity. Green jobs have overtaken fossil fuel jobs in 2021. For every one fossil fuel job, there are, I think, 2 to 3 green jobs being created. And they're highly paid and highly skilled jobs. So surely, we should be kind of pushing this? Or am I just an idealist?
No, I couldn't agree more, which is why we're in the same room. Can I just ask you, what is your... When Labour took over quite a few months ago, one of the first articles that I read, I think it might have been even on Everything Electric newsletter or whatever, was that with a stroke of a pen, they allowed, I can't remember how many, couple hundreds of solar farms and onshore wind turbines to be installed. And I read that and I was like, this is madness. The Tories were supposed to be, or Conservatives were supposed to be the party of, business and stuff. And they just kept that at bay or didn't let that happen. And like you say, that's billions of pounds not being spent and people not getting jobs. It's crazy to me.
It is crazy. And it's crazy to a lot of people. And, we know the Conservatives were being, funded and bankrolled by a lot of fossil fuel money. So there was an agenda there quite clearly. And when Sunak did his famous Rishi rollback of taking 2030 back to 2035, we knew that there was something going on that wasn't obvious on the surface. They were saying, yes, we support electrification and all this green industry, but actually, we're doing policies which would completely slow it down. And I don't want to be political on this podcast.
No, I was just curious of your opinion, sorry.
Yeah, but I think it's worth saying that, Labour pre-election were talking so much about electric cars and so much about, GB Energy and all this. And since they were elected, people like me have been sitting, straining our ears, waiting for something to be said.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been said. And I just think, come on, let's engage. Let's talk about all the easy levers we can pull to make it easier and cheaper for people to access electric cars, and how we can kind of recreate this wonderful energy system where ultimately we can be off grid with our batteries on our solar on our houses, where electricity is free. Let's work as a society to do that, and let me hear some policy. Let me hear some engagement from the cabinet, so we can all help make this happen.
Yeah. So going back to the Electric Vehicles UK, and how does that stack up with everything that's going on already? Fully charged, the Fair Charge campaign, EVA England, and where does that lie within the grid? If you were have to explain to people, is there any conflict of interest or?
No, there shouldn't be any conflict of interest at all. I mean, we're all wanting the same outcomes, don't we? Which is more people driving more affordable electric cars and paying less for their energy. So if we've made a mistake, it's that we have been too many different voices with too many different names, and consumers kind of get confused. The guy came up to me earlier on and said, "No, wait a minute. Are you fully charged? Are you fair charged? Are you, stop burning stuff? Who are you?" And I think that's a really interesting thing, that we haven't got this really, umbrella identity to say that, we are EV UK. And if you want a question, or if you want something to happen, or if we can help you, come to us. And I think there are lots of very, very laudable, very good organizations within the EV sector. And I think we've all got to come together, and that includes the car makers and the charge point operators and the energy suppliers, and just help make this happen as one big, force is the wrong word, just big community of people who want the same thing, which is to move it forward and to counter all that misinformation and all those, let's be honest, vested interests who don't want this to happen. And I think we're being completely idealistic if we think that this is all kind of an organic process, all this negativity. It's divided up into the keyboard warriors who are making a career out of being anti-EV.
Yeah, but they just perpetuate whatever they heard from somebody else, right?
Completely, but they're making money out of it. And, the YouTube algorithm is paying them because they get all the clicks. So you've got them. Then you've got the people who just amplify what they write again and again and again, which then goes across Facebook and Twitter and even LinkedIn now. And then you've got the vested interests who, whose businesses are going to be affected by this. And that's a broad group, And then at the end of that chain, the most sinister is the countries who don't want electrification. And we know who they are. And these are dark and malevolent actors. And if you put all those kind of people and see what they would be doing underneath the radar, and I think, it is happening, then that's the reason why there is this huge anti-EV, and the word here is torrent, going on out there. And it's the old order screaming that they don't want the change. And then it's people whose mindset and whose kind of political positioning doesn't like EVs or the people who drive them. And then there's the old people who just change, the people who voted for Brexit and stuff like that. So, it's this big group of people who aren't huge in numbers, but in terms of volume and visibility, they're quite large, because you hear them on social media and you see it repeated in the papers and across all these different channels. And the worry is that, consumers have been put off, but also policymakers hear this and they think, what's going on?
Yeah.
When it is an artificial noise. And if you're out there, as I have been today, talking to people who have got EVs, they are just uniformly positive. And there was this little guy who said, well, is it obvious? They don't break down. They're clean. They've got 20 moving car parts compared to 2,000. You never have to service them. Why are people resisting? And you just think, yep, you summed it up there.
So if I may, we were talking earlier about pre-show about the events, and we've noticed that there's a decline in attendance to these shows. They're getting slightly smaller, right? And I put forward the theory that that's just my own theory, that we've reached the people that, were capable of thinking about it and critical thinking. And now we have to reach different demographic or different spectrum of people. Your point of view is that it is the misinformation. I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between. You're probably more right than I am, because I'm just a, podcaster. You've got, a lot of experience talking to politicians and other people with different spectrum of views. But what do you think? Can you reiterate your point and just explain to the listeners what you think, and also what can we do about it, and can the EV UK actually address that?
I think your instinct is partly right, that we've converted the people who are going to convert, and how do we talk to the undecideds, there's floating voters, and I think we need to think very hard about that. I mean, here we are. We've got I'm looking out the window now, and there's a big old lump of cars and people, and it's busy. The halls are really busy, but it's October. And it's cold, and these things usually are held in summer. So I would say the footfall is slightly down. There's also a lack of corporate sponsorship, because we know, there's a geopolitical and financial retraction going on, which has been started by China, and, people aren't buying big ticket purchases like, electric cars. But I think, being able to talk not to an echo chamber, and this is what these things are, and talk to a mainstream audience, we need to think about how we do that. I think that's really, really important, because while the community spirit and the admiration for the technology here is wonderful, I want to talk to people who haven't ever driven an electric car, and who have gobbled up all the myths and everything, and are standing ready to defend their position. I think how we talk and communicate with them, and how we persuade them that this isn't a threat, that it's a form of liberation, and they'll never have cheaper driving in their lives than running an electric car, or more reliable. That's the message we need to get across. And I think we've failed to get that cost of ownership message, and people won't change their behaviour because of environmental reasons or even air quality reasons. Some will, but the broad church of people will do it only because it benefits them in a financial way. So that's the message we have to get across. We haven't done it. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, it's very hard for somebody to notice that there's no CO2 in the air. There are ways to do it. You can have an infrared camera and you can see things. You can see a little bit of a mist. But it takes a bit of a scientific mind. It's not a naked eye type of thing. So we have to approach people, through like business reasons, or, I mean, frankly, even if I wasn't, kumbaya sort of person myself, vegetarian kumbaya sort of a guy, I still prefer running on electricity because it's simpler and I can control it and I can charge at home. Like, there's just so many benefits.
There are. And look, I think it's really important to say that EVs are not for everybody. There will people who will never drive one for a raft of reasons, belief systems. They don't get on with tech. They hate the liberal mindset, and they don't believe in climate change and all these other things. And I think that's fine. Look, just get on with your own lives, and there'll be combustion cars to drive for years and years and years, and nobody's going to take those from you. But if you are mildly curious and sitting on the fence, it's kind of incumbent upon you to find out what this is all about, and don't switch off, and don't believe all the stuff you've read and listened to, because it isn't true, most of it. And look, the grid isn't perfect. We need more. We've got 70,000 chargers and 13,000, rapids, ultra rapids. We're doing really well in the UK in terms of charging, and it's up 50% on last year, and we'll be up probably 50% next year. But we still need more, and we still need government to pull levers to make it more affordable and accessible for people to make the switch. Secondhand EVs have come down in price significantly, to the point where they're the same or sometimes even less than combustion cars. And, if you're listening here and you're thinking about, should I get one? You will probably never have a chance to buy EVs as cheaply as you can now, because people are going to start looking and say, and all the dealers say this to me, we cannot believe that you can buy, a Tesla Model 3 with maybe 50,000 miles for 15 and a half, 16 grand. That won't happen. They'll be up at 20.
That's not going to last, yeah.
Yeah, so, don't say they're too expensive, because they're not. The second-hand ones are really cheap. And you've got an 8-year battery warranty. and 100,000 miles with any EV. And then all the data we says that they're lasting 20 years batteries. So that there's no risk. So, I always say, look, talk to somebody who drives an EV. Don't listen to a journalist who writes for either a tabloid or a broadsheet who has never driven an EV. And I mean, I'm sitting talking to you and looking at you, and this is absolutely true. Because there are some of them out there who don't even have a license, but are writing, EV invective out there.
That's madness to me. Like, it shouldn't be allowed.
Nuts.
Some adults should pull them back and say, no, don't do this.
But then this is all social media and this is all press and everything. And, we can get into that, but let's not. It's a global phenomenon. But when it comes to this subject, which is electrification, then it means that, people are missing out on jobs, people are missing out on cheaper energy. And that's reprehensible. If you're a journalist and you are steering this ship in the wrong direction just because you get clicks.
Yeah. So on the subject of EVs, you used to do recommendation for the cheap second-hand car. That's great. What would you recommend to people these days, if I may ask you? Like, do you have any opinions on the ones on the market currently?
Look, I mean, so let's take a Kia e-Niro, 2016, 2017, maybe 2015, 50,000 miles. It's about 12 grand.
Yeah, I used to drive one. So
Yeah. I mean, what a good car that is. 256 miles, real world range I got out of one of those. And driving, not ultra carefully. And all the taxi boys in London use them. And, you're sitting in one and then you look at the odometer and it's got 300,000 miles on it. So that's a really, really good car. And then, the Hyundai Kona, which is the similar car to that, same thing, well made, good battery, long range, usable, won't cost you a lot of money, 10 to 12 grand. BMW i3, try and get the range extender because the normal one is called the RX i3. The normal one is about 100 miles, 110 miles range. But if you've got the little petrol engine, it makes a big difference. And that, there again, 9 grand, 10 grand. Renault Zoes, the later Zoes with the bigger batteries, they'll do 200.
Oh yeah, they're amazing little things.
190, 200 miles, and you can buy those for less than £10,000 with tiny mileages, relatively speaking. And then you get on to Tesla Model S's. You could buy one for £10,000 now. It'll have done a few miles. It'll be an early car. And I would always recommend don't get the 85 because the batteries weren't great. Go for the 90 or the 75. But we see them all the time with these epic mileages that have been worked as taxis, 450,000 miles. There was one in Australia that Robert tested that had done 660,000 kilometres, which is, I think, 450,000 miles.
Wow.
Original battery. And that's a big old piece, that is. It's a lovely old car. Big, comfortable thing. And I mean, I've driven them with miles on them, as I've said, and they're lovely. And then the Model 3, I've had a Model 3 for 4 years, 45,000 miles, and it's cost me nothing. Tyres at 45,000, just one set. And so, about 750 quid is my maintenance for 4 years and 45,000 miles. You can only dream of that, can't you?
Yeah.
And those, as I said, are around sort of 15 grand, 16 grand. And there are loads of others, Corsas, e-Corsas. It's not the best EV in the world, but, you can get them almost half price now.
Yeah. And the amazing thing about EVs is that even if the car is 5 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, it's still going to be peppy, nice little car. Whereas ICE engines, they degrade over time. Unless you actually take it apart, put it back together with all the new bits and bobs, which is going to cost you quite a pretty penny to do that. So, I think recommendation of secondhand EVs these days is a no-brainer.
Go onto Auto Trader and just put in electric cars, and you'll see all the ones, and you can get them for even less. I mean, the Nissan Leaf, the 24 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, that'll do about 70 miles to one charge. They're okay, but I would always say, look, get something with a decent range. I used to have a little Citroen C0 which did 50 miles to one charge, and you see them around, and they're sort of 2 grand, 2.5 grand. And they'd be fine for a town car. In fact, the original car I had, 7 years ago, is still out there. I saw it for sale the other day. It's still working, obviously, and still doing the mileage. So, they are really, really cheap now. But if you want it to be a practical thing, get something that'll do between 150 and 200 miles. And they're out there for less than 10 grand. It's as simple as that. And why wouldn't you?
I agree. Thank you very much, Quentin.
Absolutely.
As always, I hope to have you on.
No, well, let's do it in another couple of years or whatever. But you keep up the good work too, because we're all part of this great community that is spreading this message of hope, of optimism, of innovation, of imagination, of creativity and engineering. And look, that's just good.
Thank you.